What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started on the video, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you guys that blew up the live stream yesterday. Had a lot of fun. Had almost 1,500 people in there. I say it all the time. You guys are the best supporters on YouTube. I am truly proud of the community that I have at least helped build on YouTube in the New York Giants community. You guys are incredible. Yes, sometimes you get a troll or two, but you guys are the best. You guys always support me, and you guys always give me more of an incentive to work harder on YouTube and try to continue to grow this channel. So thank you for that. Thank you guys for blowing up that live stream. One thing I wanted to do, and one thing that a lot of people always say, and I see in the chat, and sometimes I feel bad when there's that many people in there, oh, respond to the chat, respond to the chat. I'm going to go live today on Twitter. I have not been able to do a call-in show on YouTube for a long time because I get a lot of trolls. I get people that send inappropriate photos or they say racial slurs. So I've tried to steer away from that. But I've seen a lot of people do these Twitter live streams where it's basically like a call-in show. And I've never done one. It may be a little bit rusty. Maybe somebody will help me out hosting it. But regardless, I want to try it. So if you guys don't follow me on Twitter, I wanted to post my Twitter link. If you want to follow me, by all means, please do. Yes, I know the Twitter handle's a little bit goofy. Wasn't taking this channel very seriously when I set it up. But it's at DA Entertainah 85. Come on over, talk about the Giants, whatever you want to talk about, the offseason, the previous season, the draft, the GM search, the head coach, everything else, and we'll definitely talk about it. And in this video, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the head coach. We're also going to focus mainly on the GM search. Of course, yesterday, Dave Gettleman retired, and yes, I will have a video up on that either later today or tomorrow, talking about how Dave Gettleman failed as a GM with the New York Giants. At this point in time, everybody knows it. There's no defending it. Dave Gettleman was an abysmal failure with this football team, and this year cemented it. And we'll go over all the reasons as to why in that video. But they will be bringing in a new GM. And there are a lot of reasons, I think, to be encouraged as a New York Giant fan. Listen, man, I think right now I completely realize myself and a lot of Giants fans are up in arms. They're upset with the way the team has performed, and we want heads to roll. And I think a lot of New York Giants fans are demanding it. Dave Gettleman is now retired. Giants fans want a complete outsider for the GM. And I think that's step one before we even start to worry about the head coach. And yes, I realize Giants fans want Joe Judge gone. I've got on record about a month ago, 5 weeks ago, that I would want to complete rip it all up. Start from scratch, bring in a new head coach, bring in a new GM, and start it going forward. Will the New York Giants do that? We don't know. We haven't received word quite yet on what the plan is going to be with Joe Judge. Word came out that Joe Judge had a meeting with the players. Nothing definitive came out there. There were rumors, according to sources from within ESPN, that the Giants are leaning that Joe Judge will be back. But at least the way that it appears now is they're going to do the GM search first, and then they're going to decide whether or not they bring Joe Judge back. And listen, the reasons to fire Joe Judge are clear. You want to bring in the best GM candidate possible, and you want to allow him to make that decision. And if you're asking me if I was a GM coming in, if I would bring back Joe Judge, if I had no ties to this organization, my answer to you would probably be no, because honestly, you can't convince me as a fan that there are not better head coaches out there that would be willing to take this job than Joe Judge to date. Joe Judge so far, I know he's been dealt a really poor hand. I know the team had a ton of injuries. That's just my opinion on the matter. Has not proven, at least as of now, to be a good head coach in the NFL. Could he be? Anything's possible. He could grow and become a better head coach. And if he gets a third year with this team, he might. And we'll have to wait and see if he is back with the New York Giants. But on this channel, one thing that I always try to do, even if I don't agree with it, I'm always going to at least try to find the reasoning as to why, if Joe Judge is, if a GM does come in from the outside with no ties and is not forced Joe Judge upon him by John Mara, why would a GM, what would be his reasoning to want to bring Joe Judge back? After all, Joe Judge has struggled. He's got 10 wins to his name. This team won 4 games. They had their most losses in terms of from a head coach within a single season in the history of the franchise this year. Going 4-13, they took a step back. You can blame injuries all you want, and that is certainly a big factor. But regardless, this team completely fell off down the stretch, and they started 0-3. I'm not saying they were completely healthy, but they were much healthier and had a good enough team to be able to go out there and beat some of the teams that they did. So Joe Judge had a really bad year as a head coach for the New York Giants, and you could point to a lot of things. If I was a GM, when I really thought about it, the only reason I would bring Joe Judge back is for less pressure. And that's my honest opinion. And to improve this team to potentially make it more attractive to be able to bring in a better head coach. And let me explain. If you bring Joe Judge back next year, say Monty Osifort gets the job or whoever, Joe Shane, the guy that you want to get the job, say he gets the job, and he says to himself, okay, if I keep Joe Judge for a year and Joe Judge wins 10, 11 games, I look smart. Joe Judge proves that he's a young head coach now that is starting to turn the corner. And with my tutelage from, bringing in the players, we're growing something here. And people could say, wow, I got a young head coach. I got a young GM. This could be something for the next 15 years. If Joe Judge fails, I had nothing to do with it. I wipe my hands clean. Half the fan base is going to feel like John Mara forced him on me anyway. And I get to go out there and bring in the head coach of my choosing with an improved roster. Because I have to believe as a GM, my first year here, I'm going to improve this roster. I got 2 early first-round picks, so on and so forth. So it's going to be a more attractive destination. Also, if I don't draft a quarterback this year, I'm able to convince a head coach, listen, I'm going to take the quarterback that you want next year. We're going to build the team around my and yours vision, and we're going to build this thing together long term. So the way I look at it is this. If I'm the GM, I come in as Joe Schoen and Joe Judge is back as the head coach, all the pressure's on Joe Judge. All the venom from the fan base is going to go to Joe Judge, and I get a free year to start to build this team up the way that I want to. That is the only rational explanation that I could see an outside GM with full control to come in here and take this job. If it was me, I would still move on from Joe Judge. I'm just giving you I think a legitimate reason as to why they may stick with Joe Judge, especially if it takes a week to 10 days to hire the GM, because now you're later in the coaching search. So that's just my opinion on the matter. I don't know if Joe Judge is going to be back or not, but I just wanted to give you guys that point. Now, let's jump into the GM search for the New York Giants, and let's talk about some of the candidates. There's actually 8. When I made this tweet, there were 7 that they've requested to bring in for an interview. One name that you're going to notice is not there is Kevin Abrams. We'll jump more into him in a second. The list of the GM candidates in 2017, when you look at this, was truly pathetic. The New York Giants did not do a search. Let's be honest. They found the first guy that they took the first guy that said that he wanted to push forward with Eli Manning. John Mara brought in guys that he had familiarity with. Dave Gettleman, of course, a former Giants scout. Mark Ross, who worked for the Giants at the time. Kevin Abrams, who, of course, worked for the Giants at the time. And the only outsider was Louis Riddick. Outside of that, they brought in nobody. This year, one thing that you'll notice, there is not one single guy that is a New York Giant on this list, and they are all coming from winning organizations, and they are all incredibly young. The oldest coach on this list is 44 years old. So it's a completely new direction. You're bringing in somebody completely from the outside who has never had ties to the New York Giants. Is there a guy here or there that has ties to Joe Judge? Yes, but that does not seem to be what they're driving home here. I think the Giants truly are looking to bring in the best guy possible to take this job that could get this team back to where they want to be. That being Poles from the Chiefs, that being Osifort from the Titans, Cowden from the Titans, Joe Schoen from the Buffalo Bills, Wilson from the Cardinals, Carthen from the Niners, and Peters from the Niners. So to me, it is a clear direction. They're looking for a guy that is coming in from a winning organization, a guy that is young, and a guy that could build with either Joe Judge or the head coach that he decides to hire this year or in the future to build up this football team. So that's my honest opinion on the matter. I do not think that Mara is forcing Joe Judge on the GM. I truly believe that. This coming out from Art Stapleton. My understanding on the Giants search, Kevin Abrams is not a candidate to succeed Dave Gettleman as general manager for the Giants per source. Obviously, things can change, but that's where things stand right now, which is good. That's very good news. I didn't want Kevin Abrams anywhere near this, but this is a change. And don't think for a minute that John Mara did not leak some of this information, whether it be Mara or whether it be people with attachments to Mara. Don't think for a minute that they didn't leak this information, because we heard a month ago Ian Rappaport say that Kevin Abrams was absolutely going to get an interview, that he was going to be part of the hiring process. I remember Lawrence Tynes saying, several people said it. Several legitimate insiders came out and said that Kevin Abrams was going to get an interview. This is John Mara, in my opinion, basically saying, listen, we hear you. We're not doing it the same way this time, which is great news, in my opinion. This then coming out from SNY. There is likely to be a complete upheaval in the front office, and some powerful people will lose some influence. What does that tell me? That tells me, as a fan base, I think we're going to get what we want. Now, you may not get Mara's brother out of there. He's his brother. We'll see. But Kevin Abrams may not have a job. A lot of these scouts may not have a job. And if they're doing this the right way, if they're hiring a Joe Schoen, you allow him to come in here and bring in his people the same way you did for Joe Judge outside of Jason Garrett, which we all know was probably Mara influence. He needs to have full say in terms of the guys that he brings in and builds this team up the right way. You have to put full faith in the guy that's taking over the job. So that's just my opinion on the matter. Let's jump into some of the GM candidates for the New York Giants. And I'll be the first to say, I don't work in the NFL. I don't work within circles. I don't have the most knowledge about these guys, but I did my research the best I could, just to get a general outlook on the guys that they're bringing in. And the first thing I'm going to look at is the teams they're bringing them in from. First guys we're going to talk about are the two 49er candidates, that being Adam Peters and that being Ran Carthon. I think Peters is obviously the guy that stands a much higher probability of getting this job. Carthon's kind of bounced around. He's been a scout with the Falcons. He was with the Rams. He actually lost his job with the Rams, not due to his fault. They moved on from Fisher. And then, obviously the new GM or the new coach brought the guys in that he wanted. And then he found a job with the San Francisco 49ers where he's kind of moved up the ranks. He's director of player personnel. He's 40 years old. We'll jump a little bit more into him. But the guy that I really want to hit home is Peters. Now, the 49ers in recent history, while Peters was there and he's very highly thought of, they actually had to create a position for him to stay to become the assistant general manager this past year when he was going out for general manager interviews. Got a couple of second interviews, didn't land any jobs, but the 49ers think very highly from within that organization about Adam Peters. He's the assistant GM for the 49ers. He's been in the league for 18 years. He's only 38 years old. And over the last couple of years, they've drafted George Kittle in the 5th round, Fred Warner in the 3rd round, Nick Bosa, 1st overall, but still a great pick, Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round. So the Niners have drafted well. Of course, they're 2 years removed from a Super Bowl appearance. They're in the playoffs this year. Shanahan, again, one thing you're going to notice with all these GMs, they all have good head coaches as well. Shanahan is obviously known to be a pretty good head coach for the 49ers, but regardless, they've drafted well. They've put these players in good situations, and he's a guy that is very highly thought of. Let's dive a little bit more into Adam Peters. Peters is in his 18th season in the NFL and 4th as vice president of player personnel for the Niners. He joined the Niners after spending the previous 8 seasons, 2009 to 2016, with the Denver Broncos. In 16, Peters was named the Broncos Director of College Scouting after spending 2 seasons as the team's Assistant Director of College Scouting. 2014 to 2015, Peters spent 3 years as the National Scout from 11 to 13 after originally joining the Broncos as a regional scout in 2009. And of course, you guys remember Peyton Manning having a lot to do with it, but incredible defense there. The Denver Broncos went on to win a Super Bowl. So Peters was at least part of the building of that roster as well before he went over to the San Francisco 49ers. And Peters seems to be one of the guys that New York Giants fans are certainly behind the team potentially hiring. They promoted Adam Peters from vice president of player personnel to assistant general manager. They actually created a new position for him, which means if he was breathing down John Lynch's neck before, he basically is in Lynch's lap. Peters seems to be a hot name around the NFL these days. He's interviewed for vacant general manager positions around the league during the offseason, although he didn't get them. So the Niners kept him and promoted him. So a guy that's, last year was looked at as a potential GM candidate for several teams. You figure it'll be this year too, and I think the Giants will have competition for Peters' services, but definitely a guy that I'm interested in, and hopefully he's willing to take the job if the New York Giants feel he's the man for it. Next guy we're going to briefly talk about, like I said, there's not as much to talk about with Carthon. He's a former running back, played for the Colts and a number of other teams. This is his experience in terms of being an executive. Atlanta Falcons was a pro scout from 2008 to 2011. With the Rams, he was a director of player personnel from 12 to 16. Like I said, they then moved on. He got a job quickly thereafter with the San Francisco 49ers, and he's been the director of pro personnel from 2017 to present day. Ran Carthon is in the 4th season of Director of Pro Personnel for the Niners. In his role, Carthon manages the pro scouting department in evaluating players among the professional leagues, while continuing his duties of advanced scouting of the 49ers' upcoming opponents. In addition, he prepares the club for acquisitions through free agency, trades, and the daily waiver wire. So those are the first 2 guys we talked about from the San Francisco 49ers. You would think Peters would be the guy that the New York Giants would probably be more interested in, but don't bank on it. I mean, just take a look at the coaching search last time around. A lot of people thought that Joe Judge was the most unqualified candidate. That's the guy that the New York Giants inevitably ended up going with. So if a guy like, Carthon comes in there and he blows the New York Giants away, maybe that will in fact be the guy that the New York Giants decide to go with. Next up, this to me is a very interesting candidate, and he's actually the youngest on the list. From the Kansas City Chiefs, let me just make sure I get the name right. I don't want to screw any of this up. Ryan Poles. He's only 36 years old. He actually played college football at Boston College as an offensive lineman for Matt Ryan. And the one thing I look at with the Kansas City Chiefs this year, what do we all think about? We think about how they were able to improve that offensive line in one quick year. He's said to be the right-hand man of their current general manager, and Poles is thought to be moving up from within the NFL to potentially land a general manager spot in the near future. But let's learn a little bit more about him. He's been with the Chiefs his entire career. We all know the Chiefs are one of the best run organizations in all football. Having Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes certainly helps, but he was a part of that evaluation process. Like I said, he's been there for 13 years. Was the college scouting coordinator from May 10th May 2010 rather to June of 2016 for 6 years, then was promoted to Director of College Scouting for 2 years, then became the Assistant Director of Player Personnel, then Executive Director of Player Personnel. That's been his roles with the Kansas City Chiefs, and the New York Giants have requested to bring Ryan Poles in for an interview. This is a little bit more learning about him. Poles has been a member of the Chiefs personnel department for nearly 12 years, starting as a scouting assistant in 2009 and working his way up to his current title. Poles was previously the Chiefs Director of College Scouting and plays a significant role in the team's draft strategy. Poles served as General Manager Brett Veach's right-hand man during the team's all-virtual draft, facilitating communication between critical members of the organization as the team made each pick. So, obviously, there's a lot to, say of what goes on within that Chiefs organization, according to this. Borgonzi's another name, but the New York Giants reportedly have not requested an interview from him. But Poles is certainly a guy I'm interested in, specifically because of how well they rebuilt that offensive line. Him being a former offensive lineman, you would think he had at least some say in some of the selections that they made. And if you look at some of the Chiefs' more recent picks, I mean, like I said, they've landed 2 really good offensive linemen this past draft. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey. We don't need to talk about Pat Mahomes. That goes without saying. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, so on and so forth. Now we're going to talk about, I think, probably the most popular candidate amongst New York Giants fans. Myself included. If I had to pick one guy that would get this job, it would probably be him. But I think there are several candidates on this list, Peters being one of them for sure, that would probably be my 1A that I'd be very happy with. But Joe Schoen is a guy that we've heard about now for over a year and has been very popular in the potential GM search. Came up with the Carolina Panthers. No, he did not start with Dave Gettleman. He started there in like 2000. Gettleman did work with him, but a long time after he'd already been with the Carolina Panthers. And the first thing that Beane did, the current GM for the Buffalo Bills, when he got the job, was he called up Joe Schoen. And he got Joe Schoen over there to be his assistant general manager. That is the first move that Beane made. The Buffalo Bills had not made the playoffs for 17 years before Beane and Schoen got there. They've now made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 seasons. They've drafted several good players. I think Schoen was not there for a couple of these players. Somebody told me on Twitter, but regardless, he drafted several good players on the Carolina Panthers as well. He was part of that process. Wyatt Teller, they did not decide to hang on to Wyatt Teller. I do think he was there for him. Was the 166th overall selection. Teller had the highest PFF grade of any offensive lineman in football last year, with a 93 grade at the guard position. So they drafted him. He was a part of that process. Dion Dawkins, left tackle, 63rd overall. Tremaine Edmonds, 16th overall. Matt Milano, 163rd overall. Tre'Davious White, who I don't think he was there for. Josh Allen, he certainly was, 7th overall. One of the better quarterbacks in the league. And nobody could deny that the Buffalo Bills have fixed their team rather quickly since Beane's come over there to become the GM, and they've done a great job in terms of drafting and building that roster. Obviously, some of the trades they made as well went a long way. But this coming out from Beane regarding Schoen. He's going to be a GM. Bills general manager Brandon Beane said of Joe Schoen 2 years ago. Speaking very highly about him. Learning a little bit more about Schoen. Before Beane, pronounced Schoen, and Coach Sean McDermott arrived, the Bills had not made the playoffs in 17 years. They've now made it in 3 of the last 4 seasons, seemingly have everything going in the right direction. I actually showed a video of Joe Schoen on one of my YouTube live streams a couple of days ago. He seems like an impressive guy. He seems like a very intelligent guy, and he was actually first hired, if I'm not mistaken, by Bill Parcells while he was with the Miami Dolphins. So definitely a guy that, it warrants a look. Let's put it that way. The next guy we're going to talk about is Ryan Cowden. I think that's how it's pronounced. And we're going to talk about both candidates with the Tennessee Titans. And I think Cowden, to me, is pretty interesting. I think both these candidates are interesting. The other one being Monty Osenfort. The thing that you're going to say when you hear Monty Osenfort is, ties to Judge. I don't want that guy. I know a lot of people are going to say that because you're going to feel it's going to give Judge a little bit more stability. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, but both of these guys coming over from the Tennessee Titans. The one thing that is a little bit of a red flag for me for the 2 Titans candidates, the last 2 drafts specifically, have not gone well. And we'll go over that list, but they have drafted some good players. Well, Cowden has been there overall. Let me go over some of the names that I wrote down. Jeffrey Simmons, A.J. Brown, Adoree Jackson, Janu Smith, 100th overall. Jayon Brown was a 5th-round pick. And Harold Landry was 41st overall. He has 12 sacks this year for the Tennessee Titans. So they've definitely drafted pretty well over the last couple of years, which is why they have one of the best teams in football. And both of these individuals have something to do with it. Ryan Cowden in his 22nd NFL season and his 6th with the Titans. In 2018, he was promoted to Vice President of Player Personnel. He originally joined the franchise as Director of Player Personnel. Cowden oversees all areas in the scouting department, both college and pro, including advanced scouting, free agency preparation, and evaluation of players in the NFL and all other professional leagues. In addition, he assists with college scouting and preparation in the NFL draft. So it seems like he has a lot of responsibility in terms of drafting, in terms of player evaluation. These are a list of some of the players that the teams drafted while he was a member of both. He was a member of the Carolina Panthers before the Titans. Since beginning his work as a national scout in 2008 to his final year in 2015, the Panthers regime featured Cowden, has selected the likes of Cam Newton, Luke Kuechly, Josh Norman, so Kawan Short, Shaq Thompson, so a lot of really good players, right? With the Carolina Panthers, we all remember that team went 15-1. He was a part of the building process of that football team. With the Titans, and I've mentioned the majority of these players, I don't think he was there for a couple of them, though, which is why I didn't mention them. I think he came after the draft in 2016, in which they selected Derrick Henry and Kevin Byard. He was certainly there for Corey Davis, Janu Smith, A.J. Brown, and a number of the other players that I did say. But clearly a guy that is very highly thought of from within NFL circles, another young player from a good organization that they're bringing in. Cowden began his career in the NFL as a scouting assistant with the Panthers in 2000. He quickly advanced to an area scout and would end up patrolling the Southeast scouting area for the team from 01 to 07. Cowden also worked as a national scout, senior college scout, and then assistant director of college scouting to round out his time with the Carolina Panthers. Pretty good. As far as Ossenfort goes, Ossenfort just came to the Titans 2 years ago in 2020. I'm not going to go over his whole resume. He was with the New England Patriots. He only was able to go up so far with the Patriots, which is why he ended up leaving. He couldn't get as high as he wanted to get, which is why he left. He took the job with the Tennessee Titans. He's been there since 2020. And his official job title, I think I wrote it down. Let me just make sure. I want to make sure that I get this right. Ossenfort, well, he's with the Tennessee Titans. His job title is, I don't have it on me right now, but I think he's director of pro personnel, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's not an assistant GM. Director of player personnel, actually. I got it right here. Director of player personnel in May of 2020. So he technically was not there for the 2020 draft. He was there for this past year's draft in 2021. And, of course, part of some of those great Patriots teams before that. Ossenfort has long been considered a favorite for the Giants GM job, should it become available, which it is now. He has ties to head coach Joe Judge, having spent 15 seasons with the New England Patriots, including 6 as director of college scouting. He left the Patriots to join the Titans in 2020. Ossenfort is said to have a good relationship with Judge. So if he does get the job, maybe that does play a factor, especially if Joe Judge stays on as the head coach. He is really the only guy, at least so far, that they've requested an interview from that has really strong ties to Joe Judge. And then this I just wanted to go over is their most recent drafts with the Titans, and probably why out of all these teams, they would probably be the team that I would least be interested in from bringing, these two candidates on. I'd probably be much more interested in all the other candidates. They drafted Caleb Farley this past year, who has struggled. I think he might be hurt. Monty Rice, Elijah Molden, like nobody's jumping off the page in terms of being immediate contributors with the Titans. I don't watch the Titans, but I don't think they have. And then you look at the draft before, Isaiah Wilson. I mean, he's on the Giants now. He got cut after a year with all the off the field things, so on and so forth. So over the last 2 years, you could at least say that they probably haven't blown you away in terms of their drafting in Tennessee. Still a very productive franchise, a very good franchise, but neither one of these guys would probably be at the top of my list. The Arizona guys, I'm not going to talk too much about because there's not much to pull up on. They have been with the organization for a very long time, that being Adrian Wilson and Quentin Harris. Both of them are former players of the Arizona Cardinals, and they've moved up throughout their tenure with the Arizona Cardinals football team. I just couldn't find too much on either one of them. There are some videos on them on the net, but I'm interested in both of them. They're both young. They're both coming from a very good organization. They both had some of this, some say in terms of the players that the Cardinals drafted in recent years. Much like a lot of the other teams that we've talked about in this video, the Cardinals flip things over real quick. During their rebuild process and are now among one of the better teams in the NFC conference. They had the first pick, 3 or 4 years ago, and Wilson and Quentin Harris deserve some credit for that, which is why I'm sure the New York Giants are looking to bring them in for an interview. But I think the one clear thing with all these candidates that the New York Giants are bringing in, it looks like they're open to going down a different direction, something that John Mara has not done. In the most recent GM searches, he's played it safe. He's brought in guys that he was familiar with. He's realizing, it seems, that this team is broken and he needs to go outside of the New York Giants facility to fix it. Let's hope that one of these guys that comes in gets the job done, and we'll see if they decide to push forward with Joe Judge or not. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.